Hello, everybody. We're here with another edition of Compliance Solutions, a show with practical solutions for everyday distributor compliance. And we have two fantastic guests with us today. We're going to talk for a bit about the FTC, a letter that Tina, the Truth in Advertising, wrote to the FTC, and then the FTC response with a press release and how this is going to affect distributors and company owners. So the first thing I want to do is just real quickly introduce our guests today. We've got Kevin Grimes. I announced on the last Compliance Solutions that he was the most experienced and accomplished attorney in the world. I gave him that title because nobody else has, brought it up. He's got a career, I believe it's over 30 years. He's doing well. And he's in the who's who of direct selling. His clients are all the way up there. So he's also created MLM Compliance VT, which is an educational platform for teaching distributors what they need to do to remain compliant. We've also he's a former distributor. He's with Thompson Burton, and he has the biggest heart for foster children and for adopted children. And he just is a very loving soul for being a lawyer. I'll give him that.
Wow.
And then we've got Troy Dooley. Troy is he's the beachside CEO. What can I say? I've known Troy for as long as I've known Kevin, and he's just like a big brother to me. I just love him to pieces. He has the MLM News Desk, which is one of the leading resources for news for the MLM industry, the network marketing professionals, happily married to a lovely lady that writes novels and former Marine, or should I say, there is no such thing as a former Marine.
Right.
All right. Well, let's get into this, gentlemen. We've got some things to talk about. To begin with, let's get a good perspective of what's going on here. Kevin, do you want to give some opening thoughts on how this thing came together?
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned the Tina letter that was sent from Tina to the FTC last 2 weeks ago on June 30th. Mm-hmm. And that letter, it was a 2-page letter to the FTC, but it had over a 90-page list of 660 MLM companies that it was putting on notice about what it was sending to the FTC. But I don't think things really started there. I think the genesis of all this was in October of last year, when one of the 5 FTC commissioners and the gentleman who is now the acting director of the FTC's Bureau of Consumer Protection, Samuel Levine, wrote an article that appeared in the University of Pennsylvania Law Review. And in that article, the two of them were advocating bringing back or dusting off a very, very old FTC enforcement strategy called the Penalty Offense Authority. So obviously I have no idea, what goes on, inside of Tina. I have no idea about the, private dialogue between Tina and the FTC, but Tina obviously was aware of this article and, the commissioner's interest in bringing this back. And so I think the letter was in large part playing off of that law review article, and again trying to encourage the FTC to resurrect the Penalty Offense Authority. And then lo and behold, the very next day, the FTC on July 1st issues a press release in which it says, hey, just letting the world know, we're putting them on notice that we are going to be engaging. Well, there's another piece to all this, and that is in April of this year, the FTC suffered a massive defeat in the U.S. Supreme Court in the case of AMG Capital versus FTC. This case did not involve an MLM company. Rather, it was one of those payday lending businesses that the FTC went after, got a judgment against the company for over $1 billion. I think it was like 1.6 or 1.3 billion dollars. Needless to say, the company was very interested in contesting that. And the issue was whether 80 to 85% of all of the enforcement actions the FTC has brought over the last several decades have involved Section 13B. This is a section, in the FTC Act in which Congress granted the FTC the ability to pursue certain type of injunctive relief. So an injunction means, hey, we can get a court order to stop a particular action or stop the company or shut it down. But over the years, the FTC somehow expanded that or convinced the federal courts to expand that to include not only injunctive relief, but also equitable relief in which, hey, court, we want to disgorge the company's ill-gotten gains and disgorge profits, to take money. And, hey, court, that should, equitable relief should also include the ability to make restitution to consumers. And so over the decades, the FTC has literally extracted billions of dollars from countless companies through this. And then in April of this year, the Supreme Court said, you don't have the legal authority to do that. 13B does not allow you to do that. And then all of a sudden, the FTC became the toothless tiger. And so again, I have no idea about the discussions and the thinking that's gone on internally with the FTC, but I have to believe that their position is, oh my gosh, what are we going to do now? And so obviously, the two gentlemen who wrote that article thought, well, man, our next best weapon, maybe for arguably even a better weapon, will be to bring back the penalty offense authority. So that's where we are. And what was interesting is in February of this year, Mr. Levine did an interview with the Capitol Forum, in which he was, of course, again, this was prior to the Supreme Court's decision, which, by the way, was a unanimous 9-0 decision. There was nobody who sided with the FTC. But in February, Mr. Levine was talking a little bit about this, but also the gist of his comments in the interview was about resurrecting the penalty offense authority. So sure enough, it has now been resurrected. Here we are. But I would say of perhaps greatest significance to the MLM industry is the fact that he disclosed that the MLM industry, and specifically income claims and product claims, are one of the FTC's top 5 targets for the penalty offense authority. So if ever there has been a time for the industry to pay attention to what the FTC is doing and where its head is, this is the time. Because honestly, goodness, and not to wax into hyperbole, but this is absolutely the most significant thing that's happened in the regulatory arena in the last 40 years.
And the scary part about it is, I don't think a lot of companies know about it. I want to come over to Troy and get his perspective on it, but the letters that went out from the first TINA letter to the FTC went to 660 companies, but it went to info at customer service at. I've asked many of them if they've received it. They either didn't receive it or they found it in a dead email box. So that could be a real issue too. Troy, what is your perspective on this whole penalty offense authority?
I think we've got to, like Kevin said, we got to go back and start looking at the process of why they're doing what they're doing. We know that Tina is she is a golden child over there. They love everything about truth in advertising. They give her credit. They love them. She's in the Senate subcommittee hearings. They always bring them in. So when you look at that, you realize that truth in advertising under Bonnie's leadership over the last few years truly has become a consumer advocacy group that the FTC loves to use. And I think it's because that organization doesn't just go after network marketing companies. I mean, they literally have gone after everybody. So that's just an easy person or an easy organization, I should say. I always mess that up because she uses that acronym, Tina. But when you look at it, they use that as their mouthpiece. And usually that's a warning. They want it to go out. She's got a giant database and they push that stuff out. The problem with it is that most advocates today are one-sided. They're not looking for what is the actual truth in advertising. What they're looking at is, what can we go that's low-hanging fruit, attack these companies or attack this industry and see what that does for us. And I've got to give them, from a marketing standpoint, they've done great. And I should say too, they've actually brought some stuff to the surface, not just indirect sales. one of the things that they're attacking right now is made in America. And if you actually study that, you realize that's as convoluted as organic or natural or some of the stuff that we go into. So having somebody that's actually, that's their heart, that's what their crusade is, I'm happy with that. But now when we go back to the FTC, I think that the agenda there is somewhat different. And I do think they both work with each other because they have a common enemy, if you will, and that's people that are going after the consumer. But the FTC is full of a bunch of bureaucrats that really ought to be fired or retired because they still think they make the laws. And that's not what that organization's for. They're to interpret what Congress gives them. And when they interpret it wrong, well, they're going to get screwed up because that's what we've seen it in the lower courts. Now we've seen it at the Supreme Court. And I think when they go after any company, the first thing that's going to happen is there's some heavy duty litigators now that's going to say, look, their track record kind of sucks over the last 3 years. So let's go and push this a little bit. Let's make sure that what they're actually doing to us is legit versus just laying down and saying, oh, let me just write you a check or I'm sorry and we'll do whatever. I really think there's going to be a shift. And with that said, and I'll throw it back to you and Kevin, I also think this needs to be a wake-up call for direct sales. I don't care what you call yourself. I don't care if you're MLM, network marketing, I'm a single level, party plan, affiliate marketing, I'm whatever. I mean, make up a new phrase if you want to. It needs to be a wake-up call that we do it right. Because if we're not holding each other accountable and saying, whoa, wait a minute, here's the boundaries, and they're pretty good boundaries, stay within those boundaries. If you can't do that, maybe you shouldn't be in the business anyway.
Excellent. Well, let's talk specifically about all of this and what we can expect next. Is there, Kevin, let me throw it to you. I don't know what to expect next. I almost was expecting another press release 2 days later to clarify what they were doing 2 days ago. Yeah. But what do you think is going to come out now? How is this going to affect the business owners, the distributors? Where are we going to go with this?
Well, first of all, to Troy's point, yeah, where are we going to go with this? Is the industry needs to get out in front of this. Individual companies need to get out in front of this, and field leaders need to get out in front of this too, because field leaders, if your company isn't doing it right, you need to encourage your company and get on them about doing it right, because your business is at stake too. So, one of the points I absolutely want to communicate is, perhaps Tina and the FTC would like everybody to believe that income claims and product claims cannot be made in MLM, and nothing could be farther from the truth. That is not the case, and that is not the law. They absolutely can be made. What's crucial here is to understand what a deceptive income claim or a deceptive product claim is. And of course, obviously, those are illegal under the law. And so companies and individual distributors need to understand how to make income claims and product claims properly. And I think that's the most, from my perspective, I think that's the most important message. Now, in terms of what we can expect from the FTC, well, we know because Mr. Levine has laid that out, okay? MLM, one of the top 5 targets in the income claims and product claims arena. So the way the Penalty Defense Authority works is that the FTC initiates an enforcement action rather than litigation. The FTC can handle these things internally. They have their own administrative judges and administrative courts. So they will bring this enforcement action internally, like they did with Herbalife back in 2015. And to use Troy's phrase, low-hanging fruit income claims or deceptive income claims and deceptive product claims are super easy, prevalent low-hanging fruit. So they will target a single company. They will resolve that. Okay, that will become a consent order. Okay, and then with that, the commission will put the entire industry on notice. They send out these things called warning letters, or they call them a synopsis, which is just in effect a warning letter that says, hey, company X over here was making deceptive income claims. We tagged them for that, okay? And we are hereby declaring to the world that deceptive income claims are illegal, and any company or individual who makes them is violating the FTC Act, and they send those out to all the companies out there. And so now they can say, hey, the entire industry is on notice that these types of claims are deceptive. After that, any company, and there will undoubtedly be groups of companies that, not that when I say they don't get the memo, it's not that they don't receive the FTC's warning letter. Some companies are just going to choose to ignore it. And then all of those companies can be grouped together. And that's when the FTC deploys its penalty offense authority. I kind of analogize this, and Troy will appreciate this as a Marine. The difference between using a 50 cal sniper rifle, single shot, one shot, very effective, okay, versus a Vulcan. This is a 6,000 round per minute machine gun. Okay, it can do a lot of damage. Very different weapon. Okay, very, very different, but it does a lot of damage real fast. And so that's kind of what we got. And I don't want people to be fearful, because what I really want to talk about and emphasize is, the fact that income claims and product claims can be made, but we've got to do them properly.
Kevin, let me ask a question on how you think what I'm about to say is going to play into this. Mm-hmm. Right after all of this came down, the FTC also lost a major lawsuit against big tech. And a day after or 2 days after that, the POTUS came out and said, look, we are going after big tech in a big way. You've only got so much manpower in the FTC. So if they're really going to go after this as a monopoly, as some type of really danger to the consumer, do you think that their focus would be heavier there and this may just be a lot of yelling and noise? Or do you think they've got enough manpower to go across all the spectrums that they're looking at in the top 5?
Yeah, great question. Well, obviously, the FTC's got to move in whatever direction the president directs them. But, to say, hey, we want to focus on big tech doesn't necessarily mean to the exclusion of everything else. They've still got to be concerned with mergers. They've still got to be concerned with, other aspects of consumer protection. And again, to your point, Troy, some of in that list of the top 5 targets, there were some aspects of big tech that were involved. So I guess, unless the president, specifically directs them to, you will focus exclusively on this to the exclusion of everything else, I think we can still anticipate that MLM is going, we know it's already high on their list right now. So again, absent, I think, clear directive from higher up that, thou shalt not go after MLM, I think we can certainly anticipate that there will be some activity. The thing that people need to understand about the penalty offense authority is, unlike the FTC's former strategy of bringing individual lawsuits against companies, which it takes years to do that. It takes 12 to 18 months to investigate, and then the litigation process in federal court can last a year or longer. And then if the case is appealed, we're talking many years. One of the most significant things about the penalty offense authority is once it handles that initial enforcement actions, it can immediately just kind of splattergun the entire industry, again, with a minimal outlay of time and federal resources. So it's a very, very efficient, incredibly time efficient enforcement mechanism that, again, requires very, very little in the way of resources.
What do we tell business owners? I've talked to several people about this from last week's announcement. What do we tell business owners to do now? What are the solutions to some of this situation?
Sure. Well, first of all, don't freak out. This is not Chicken Little. The sky is not falling. It's not the end of direct selling and MLM. There is lots of good news in all this. And part of the good news is, folks, you need to do it right. Richard Brooke did a Facebook Live on Saturday, and one of the things that he said is that companies have failed. The industry, the profession has failed with respect to regulatory education. We are not giving distributors the information and the education that they need to operate their businesses properly. And I really laud Richard for making that courageous statement. That's certainly been my observation over the last 30 years. So that the entire paradigm about companies, obviously, most distributors are not going to be able to educate themselves on the regulatory subtleties of, the areas of law that directly impact their businesses. So that responsibility falls squarely on the shoulders of companies. And the industry has a rather rich tradition of just kind of sticking its head in the sand about challenging regulatory issues like, compensation plans and ensuring that the majority of distributor compensation flows from sales to customers. But the same has been true about income claims and product claims. So, one of the things as an industry, as a profession, individual companies and individual distributors need to understand it is time. A climate change has unfolded. Now the question is, hey, are we going to adapt, or are we going to, be dinosaurs and simply refuse to adapt?
Let me ask you a question, Kevin, because I agree thoroughly. Richard and I've had so many conversations on this. You and I have had this. So I'm all about holding companies accountable. They need to realize, look, man, we gotta do this. Leadership starts from the top down. But something that I've heard from them, and then something that I'm seeing across the play is, well, Troy, we don't have time for this. We're a startup, or we're in the middle of this, and we're trying to do all this stuff. So it goes on the back burner a lot of times. The other thing I'm seeing is a lot of companies in our space are launched by disgruntled reps who have been terminated from their company. So they've already been terminated for whatever reason, or they've quit, or they think they can do it better. And I understand that, but they're not business people. And they jump into this. They get software consultants, they get attorneys, they get, compliance, but none of the I guess gatekeepers seem to be willing to come together as a unit to say, do it right, or we're not going to support this. We're not doing your software. We won't keep you as a client if we're an attorney. We're not going to create your product if you've got crap in it. How do we hold everybody accountable, not just the companies out front?
Right. Well, I think it's I don't want this analogy to sound condescending, but it's kind of like raising children, or I would say, when they're teenagers. Okay, you can't force your children to make the right decisions. You hope with some counsel and some encouragement and education, they will choose to make right decisions. But at the end of the day, as an attorney, I can't make my clients do the right thing. If they refuse to do what's legal, my only option is to simply fire them as a client, which I have no hesitation about doing. But yeah, your point is really, really well taken. And I mean, it would be great if, the entire industry, all companies would do the right thing simply because it is the right thing to do. But, and one of the things I know too is clients come only in three flavors. There are those who A, know how to do it right and want to do it right. B, there are those who they aren't sure how to do it right, but they want to do it right. And then C, there are those who do or don't know how to do it right, but they could not care less. And it doesn't take very many of Group C to get an entire industry in a regulators or an advocacy groups like Tina's Gun Sites.
Ask another question, Kevin. I mean, this is Donna Marie's show, but these, as you talk,
right.
just coming up, I have seen over the last, let's see, we're in July, so let's just say 18 months during this COVID situation.
Mm-hmm.
Inside of direct sales, I've seen a pretty hard line division, and this may have started even prior to this during administration changes. I'm still trying to see how deep this goes. But one thing that I have noticed is there is a very large contingency inside of direct sales that just says, screw any agency that's got 3 or 4 letters. We don't care. And some of those seem to be company owners too. How can we try to bring unity to that, to let them realize there's still boundaries? Just because you may not like something, the laws are the laws. We have to abide by the laws. Is there a way we can try to work with that without causing more division, do you think?
Wow, that is a great question. I don't know that I have the answer to that. I think part of it may be, conversations like this, in terms of getting the word out. One of the things I want to start doing is doing more writing just to get the word out. Again, in the hopes to educate and to motivate folks to do the right thing. Because the bottom line is, and this is very interesting in our profession, because in most industries, the business needs and the legal needs are really diametrically opposed frequently. But one of the things that is fabulously unique about this industry is what's great for your business from a legal and regulatory perspective is also great for the bottom line. Okay. And so again, I think if we can educate business owners and executives about why, what's good for your business regulatorily is also great for your bottom line, your longevity, your stability, et cetera. I think that can be tremendously beneficial, but they've got to be willing to listen, because one of the things that I know is that, where there's no teachability, that company is going to be in trouble. There are only two things that have to combine, from my perspective, for a company to get in deep trouble very quickly. The first one is ignorance. I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean ignorance in terms of just lack of knowledge. Okay, and obviously I don't expect executives and company owners to be attorneys or have law degrees. That's fine. They don't need to. But when ignorance combines with arrogance, game over. And so that's where this whole issue of teachability comes in.
Boy, you couldn't have said that one better. I've got at least one last question, because this is such a deep conversation. With part of the last administration having large equity stakes in Amway, do you think that if the FTC comes after the industry, they will try to make a giant splash by going after a large company with or without any political ties to it? Or do you think they'll look at the smaller companies that are more blatant in what they're doing?
Yeah, great question. I actually did a survey. This is a long time ago. I want to say maybe 20 years on the product claim side, looking at the FTC's enforcement activities for improper product claims. Because I think there's a thinking that only medium-sized and large companies are targets, and obviously the FTC for a lot of different reasons wants to get some big scalps on the TP. But what I found in doing my research is that their targets when it came to improper product claims varied from huge 8-figure companies down to mom and pop companies that had less than 7 figures in annual revenues. So this notion that they only go after the big players or the medium-sized players simply isn't true. Even really small companies are potential targets. And again, with the penalty offense authority, because again, we have not seen that really deployed or used in our lifetimes. I mean, it started in 75 and fizzled out in the early 80s. So we haven't seen them use this tool. And again, just in terms of expansive efficiency, there ain't nothing else like it. So I think they're probably really excited about bringing it back.
Okay, I thought I had one last question, and Donna Marie's never going to have me back on one of her shows. I'll tell you, but I've got one. In the Tina letter, there was a hidden kudos, if you will, because she said, we have seen great improvement in the income claim side. So we know that they're noticing that we are doing something. We're making a shift in the way that the claims are being made, and that's probably targeted to certain companies that Tina was looking at. But at the same time, you could tell that they were very frustrated with the DSA, because the DSA had brought out a statement in some publication that they've done saying, well, companies can't be held responsible for the independent contractors in their company.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree with that, but where do you stand? I know it's a fine line, but where to me, if my brand, I can't show that brand. If that brand on that cup has the company logo on it, then the company is responsible to make sure that everything said about it is correct. Am I wrong in my thinking there, or maybe I'm just too much of a romantic thinking companies care?
Well, you're right. And again, there are a lot of myths that exist in this industry. And in the law, there's black, there's white, and there's 64,000 shades of gray. But that is to say, there are some areas of law that are absolutely crystal clear. And the issue of company liability, regulatory liability for the actions of distributors is crystal clear, and it has been established for decades. And the bottom line is that network marketing companies are absolutely, positively, 100% responsible for the actions and the words of their distributors that are associated in any way with their business. So product claims, income claims that distributors are making are absolutely 100% attributable to the company. They are the statements and the claims of the company. There is no debate on that.
Okay, I thought I understood that, but I wasn't sure. And while we're on that topic, in reviewing, and I'm going to go to a different three-letter agency. In going to the IRS side of this thing, the IRS, based on the U.S. code, seems to classify independent contractors with companies as statutory non-employees based on the terms and conditions and all that. Can you enlighten just the average rank and file exactly what that statement means?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's section 3508 of the Internal Revenue Code. And so again, as a matter of law, that section expressly provides that direct sellers or direct selling distributors are not employees of a direct selling company as long as the contract that they have specifically articulates that they are independent contractors. But related to that, Troy, is that there are many different areas of law that can impact the relationship between a distributor and a company. Well, obviously, we're talking about regulatory law. You just brought up the issue of tax law. And what's a little bit confusing about this is that distributors are independent contractors in certain areas of law, like contract law or tort law, the body of, negligence, recklessness, intentional wrongdoing. And so, for example, in contract law and tort law, yes, distributors are absolutely independent contractors. A distributor can't go out and enter into a contract on behalf of, company XYZ and bind the company. They are independent contractors. They have no authority to do that. The same is true, with tort law. If, I'm a distributor, I'm an Amway distributor, and I'm driving to do a meeting and I rear end somebody, I'm negligent. Amway is not responsible for that, again, because in the tort law arena, I'm an independent contractor. But the big takeaway is, and in the tax arena, federal tax arena, again, distributors are absolutely independent contractors and not employees. That's similarly true at the state level when we talk about unemployment compensation and workers' compensation in the vast majority of states. But in the regulatory arena, again, FTC, FDA, state attorneys general, distributors are agents of the company rather than independent contractors for regulatory purposes. So as an agent, they have the same capacity to incur liability for the company as does the CEO.
All right. Well, I knew you could explain it, and I hear that excuse all the time from people in the field. That company can't tell me what to do, and it's like, well, wait a minute. I think you don't understand the complexities. And that's the thing, I think, with our industries. People think, well, MLM has no regulation. Well, we got contract law, we got tort law, we've got regular regulations in each of the individual industries in which we work. We may be the most regulated industry out there if people really focused on everything that they should. So you always help explain it in I think it's just because you've raised boys, but you just explain it so we can all understand it. And I love that.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Well, yeah, and you get to your point, this notion that the company cannot tell me what to do, how to run my business, what I can say. That is absolutely not true. Any legitimate company is going to have well-drafted distributor agreements, terms and conditions, policies, and procedures that articulate the boundaries. And yeah, again, as a father of many children, one of the things, and I'm sure every parent who listens to this has heard from their kids, you're trying to control me. It's like, no. That's not it. Okay. I'm trying to set forth, I'm not trying to build a prison fence. I'm trying to articulate some guardrails so you don't plunge yourself over a cliff.
Well, and I think we all need that. from time to time for sure.
Kevin, Troy, I've got a question for you. I hear from my clients so often, they say, well, it's the truth. I can say it because it's the truth. And Kevin, I've heard you say before, just because it's the truth doesn't mean you can say it. What do you say to these owners that say that, even the distributors that say, it's the truth, I'm going to say it?
Right. Yeah. Well, and this is where education and information come in. And, so I don't want distributors, thinking, wow, this company is just really ridiculous, arbitrary, capricious, and it's just completely unreasonable because, hey, if I really do make $2,000 a month in this business, that's truthful, and I can substantiate it with all sorts of copies of my check or my deposit statements or whatever. I don't understand why it's illegal for me to share truthful, substantiatable information. And the same is equally true on the product claim side. Well, the answer is because there are three major considerations that go into the issue of claims. Is this a legal claim? Obviously, truthfulness is one, substantiation is another, but non-deception is the third. And this is the problem with income claims. With product claims, it's substantiation. I'll get to that in a second. But with income claims, it's the issue of deceptiveness, because a testimonial, and there are about 6 different categories of income claims that have been articulated by the federal courts and the FTCs. The testimonial, of course, is the darling. Hypothetical claims are another one. Statements of atypical earnings, our diamonds make this, our goals make this. That's another category. Of course, the lifestyle claims, pictures of mansions, big cars, big homes, big hair, all that. Not big hair directed to you, Troy, but comments or claims like that. And so the problem with my testimonial, which is truthful, hey, I make $2,000 a month with my company. I got copies of checks, my 1099, whatever, I can substantiate it, but it's deceptive. And the reason that that claim is deceptive is because it leads the reasonable and prudent prospect to believe that everybody makes $2,000 a month, or a lot of people make $2,000 a month, or it's easy to make $2,000 a month, none of which are true, and hence the deception. And so, again, the great news is there is a cure. There is an absolute cure to the deception, and it's called a proper, with the emphasis on proper, income disclosure statement. And so the cure basically is full disclosure. And this is what a proper income disclosure statement does, is it sets forth each rank in the compensation plan. It sets forth the average amount that distributors at each rank make. It sets forth the minimum that they've ever made, the maximum that they've ever made. It also sets forth the length of time that it's taken to reach those ranks. So the average, minimum, and maximum. There's some other data points that need to be in there as well. For example, it needs to disclose the average earnings of all distributors, not merely active, but all. And ideally, it should also disclose the meeting earnings as well. But so the cure involves, number one, the preparation of a proper income disclosure statement, and then the consistent dissemination of the income disclosure statement. Because a company could have the best income disclosure statement in the world, but if it's not being utilized properly by either the company or the field, the FTC and the federal courts will treat it as if it doesn't exist. And so we're right back to where we don't want to be. So those are a couple massively important points for companies and field leaders to understand. It's not enough just to have a proper one. And unfortunately, a lot of companies play fast and loose with their data. They think that an income disclosure statement is primarily a sales and marketing exercise. It is not. This is one of those rare instances in which the legal tail must wag the business dog. Okay, I'm a sales and marketing attorney. I support sales and marketing organizations. This is not a place to spin, position the numbers, get cute, or anything. This is a place where you got to follow the requirements for a proper income disclosure statement.
And we're seeing some stuff also in the field where people are starting to rank up very fast. I saw this in 2020. An individual, just blew the numbers off at the company where they're at. And then when they were being interviewed on a Clubhouse, explain that, well, my husband was in real estate. He didn't want to lay people off. So we put all those people on the phones, and they were calling people and making sales. And it was just great. And nobody could, I mean, she was doing like 200 people a month. I mean, none of that got disclosed in the main education she was doing. You know, we've seen the same thing in another company where top reps blowing and going. Well, her husband owned an SEO company. So, I mean, there's some stuff there. The truth is, I'm the number one earner in my company. But the facts to get there, the average person would never be able to come close. And that's where what Kevin's saying is so important. And it's where companies, I think, need to understand you're accountable for the garbage that the people in the field make. This is such a beautiful industry. I wouldn't be at the beach without this industry, but we have to do it right if we want to continue. And I think that's the key. Kevin, let me throw another question, and especially since Donna Marie didn't tell me I had a time limit and I don't see a little ticker down here. One of the big things that I see right now, and this is not probably an FTC, this is more the CFTC side of things, but I'm seeing in the Forex community, the crypto community, all of this, I mean, inside and outside of direct sales, we are seeing companies being hit in the direct sales space. Man, the income claims, the investment claims that are made, and it's like companies just keep their mouth shut. They just let their people go in the field. The same thing rings true for them. I mean, they may not be supplements, but man, they're just as heavy regulated as everybody else, correct?
When you start talking about securities or investments, I would say even more heavily regulated, because not only are the offerings regulated, but the individuals who have the ability to offer them are also regulated. So if a particular instrument falls within the purview of what's an investment or a security under this 33 or 34 Securities Act, there's a whole lot of regulation that comes with that, not only in terms of what can be said, but in terms of prior disclosures and in terms of the people who can offer them. Because in order to be able to offer a security in the United States, you have to be a registered securities broker. You have to have a license in order to be able to do that. And so, yeah, I agree with you absolutely, Troy, that so many of these Forex and crypto related companies are offering securities. Whether or not they do or don't know about that, I don't know. But yeah, a lot of them are really playing fast and loose with the company's existence and also with individual distributors' assets and liberty.
Well, if I come back and I say, but Kevin, I'm just providing education and I disclose that on my website, so I'm protected, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, it depends. And I'm not a securities attorney. My securities knowledge goes to the point of how to help a direct selling company not be a security. But if they want to go down that road, then the myriad requirements that are necessary to offer that are outside of my wheelhouse.
But if we go back into your field house,
mm-hmm.
let's use that as an example. I can't come to you and say, but Kevin, I did everything you told me to do. I put all those FDA disclaimers and those FTC disclaimers, so I'm good, right?
Well,
that's not true either.
No, absolutely not. Because yes, there are other 3-letter and 4-letter agencies that also have their fingers in the pie too. And so there are, like I said, there are over 30 different instruments or vehicles that fall within the purview of what is a security in the United States. And it's very, very easy to get there. The investment, what's called an investment contract, is the one that most frequently intersects with direct selling. And so,
but even a supplement company cannot just rely on the fact I had a disclaimer on my website.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. There was I think this came out in the 90s, but one of the former FTC commissioners, a guy named Roscoe Starek, made a presentation at the National Infomercial Producers annual meeting back in 96. And he said that the top 10 myths of advertising, one of the myths was called the "say it isn't so" myth, in which you make a claim and then you think with a disclaimer you insulate yourself from liability. And he said, no, you can't make a deceptive claim and think that you can just eliminate your liability by making a disclosure.
Okay, let me ask you a question on that one. When I look at, I'm trying to think of a good. There's a brand new commercial out right now on female birth control, and it's a beautiful commercial. And man, it makes. I mean, every woman should get on this stuff because you never have any concerns. And then come the disclaimers at the end of the commercial, and we've seen these for decades. Why do you think network marketing companies have been so hesitant to actually just tell the truth about their products? Look, we think this is going to work, but it might not work. Why do we hesitate on that stuff?
Well, I think, and that'd be a great question for a CEO roundtable, but I think there's speculation in the industry that, gosh, if we do that, other people aren't going to do that. That's going to put us at a tremendous competitive disadvantage. You know, how are we going to attract people to our opportunity if we're, putting out this information? In the, of course, you're talking about a prescription drug. In the prescription drug arena, it's a level playing field. All prescription drug companies, their advertising have to disclose this. It's not optional. So there's no discretion in that. Where it is discretionary, again, I would just speculate that a CEO would say, oh, we think that would just put us at a huge competitive disadvantage. On the other hand, I would say, you know what, I think telling the truth, consistently telling the truth puts you at a tremendous competitive advantage.
Yeah. I mean, heck, you can go Google me and you'll find anything under the sun. I just ripped the doors off my closet because I figured, hey, if you know in advance, then you know what you're getting. You don't have to worry about it. But a lot of people do have that fear of loss of, oh no, if nobody else is going to do it, I'm not going to do it, So, but I wanted your opinion because you deal with so many and you've got that 30,000 foot view of things. So that's why I asked that. And man, Donna Marie, I'm sorry. This is your show, not Troy's show,
Hey, I love you, Troy. You can take over my compliance solutions anytime you want. You're great. You're both great. I love you both. Well, let's get back to some closing thoughts about this whole FTC thing. I think we've talked about the solutions. We've talked specifically about good news, bad news, and it's good news for the companies that play by the rules, but for the companies that don't, they really need to pay attention to what's going on here. So let's go to Troy for some closing thoughts. Then we'll go to Kevin, and then we'll wrap up our call.
I do think it is a wake-up call. It's a tipping point for the industry as a whole. But I also see something else. I see a consolidation right now. We see some very large outside investment companies that are really excited about this space. We see companies that have said, okay, let's look at what's happened over the last 5 years, and let's make sure we're operating in a new lane. We don't want to screw this thing up. We really do care about the reps. We care about the customers. And I think as long as we are moving in that direction, it doesn't matter how slow we move, as long as we're moving that way. And there's a separation that regulators and advocates can see to where they know these companies really are listening and these companies aren't. I think as a whole, it's going to be beneficial for all of us.
Kevin, your closing thoughts?
Okay. Well, I think, a huge takeaway for the entirety of the industry is, again, not to sound melodramatic, not to sound hypey, but the Penalty Offense Authority is a game changer. It is the biggest game changer we've seen in over 40 years. And it would be incredibly naive and foolish and irresponsible for companies to ignore this, okay? There has been a radical climate change, regulatory climate change this year. And, I in my article, I use the analogy of dinosaurs. When we went through the last ice age, dinosaurs just didn't have the capacity to adapt to the massive climate change. It wasn't their fault. They didn't do anything bad. As reptiles, they just simply couldn't handle the climate change. But that's not the issue here. The issue now in our MLM climate change is willingness. Do companies, do individuals have the willingness to adapt? Those that don't, I'm afraid, are going to suffer in a very unfortunate fate, like the dinosaurs. So, but again, there's good news. Companies need to get out ahead of this, and they need to do what they need to do. That is to say, they need to develop a proper income disclosure statement. They need to articulate in their policies and procedures, they need to mandate its proper use. They need to articulate its proper use. They need to monitor its proper use, and they need to educate and train people about its proper use. The same is equally true on the product claim side. Okay. We have the industry has clear notice from the 2,000-pound gorilla that this is one of our top 5 areas of attention and focus. Okay. We couldn't have, I kind of feel like the 3 of us are Paul Revere, the FTC is coming, the FTC is coming. And, the patriots who listened to Paul Revere, it ended up safe. They ended up, turning the tide in that particular battle. And, similarly, we need to pay attention to the warnings, and we need to hear it. And again, this isn't bad for the industry. Honesty, truth has never been bad for the industry. I think it's great.
Troy, I got to come to you for any more closing thoughts, because you always have a nice comment on what Kevin said.
Well, I think he's absolutely correct on this. If we listen and we say, okay, where are we at as a company? There's some of us that we're watching the industry, but those that are watching this now need to look at their own business. If you're a company owner, you need to call your team in and say, hey guys, where do we stand on all this? Call Grimes. I don't care who you get help if you need help. If you're in the field, then you need to be saying, okay, am I doing this right? Social media is all over the place, and they're going to grab everything they can. So you want to make sure that you listen. And it's those that don't listen that usually get burned. If you're listening, you're trying to be better, you're going to move it forward. Don't let the ego get in the way. Just because you've got the fancy cars today and all that, listen, when they come after your company, they're coming after your butt too. So just because you got it today don't mean you're going to keep it. That's how I would close that one out.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Well
I
said.
didn't get a chance to introduce myself in the beginning. I am the Queen of Compliance, and I brought my tiara just to prove it. The Queen of Compliance has written a book called Compliance Solutions, What the FTC Won't Tell You We Will. And there's an excellent article in the back of the book from Kevin Grimes, Lessons in Missing the Point. I suggest every single person that owns or thinks about owning a direct selling company read this article. It's excellent, and it says it all. We really need to be aware of what we're doing and educating people on the proper ways to do it. So thank you, Troy, very much. Thank you, Kevin. We appreciate both of you in this industry, out for the good guys. Anything else?
Thank you both. And thank you for putting up with these small dogs in the background.
I see the dogs in the background. That's great, guys. Have a good one. We'll see you next time on Compliance Solutions.
Thank you both.